welcome to Creative Chronicles. I'm your host, Biba Sheik, and I'd like to introduce my lovely co-host, Jesus Washington.
Hi.
Today we have the Hinterlands Theater Company with us, and we're very pleased and excited to open up a conversation with them. And so we're going to kick it off and start getting to know each other and talking about their projects and who they are and how they work. And hopefully you'll have a beautiful evening. So I would like to ask you first, what is unique about your work and how is it valid in today's circumstances?
Okay.
Let's just go.
Go into
Go into it. It's a big question.
into validity.
Pour
Yeah.
into it anything you want.
Can we introduce ourselves? Yeah, I'm Richard Newman, and this is Liza.
Bilby.
Liza Bilby.
Mm-hmm.
Just feel better with.
Absolutely.
There's some of
Natalie.
us who aren't here who work with us, but
Yeah,
we're
so-
here tonight. So.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Well, maybe I'll just give a little history of our working together first. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fine.
You can jump in.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we started working together in 2009. We actually started in Kalamazoo,
Mm-hmm.
and because Liza was teaching there, we had met in California.
Oh,
We had both been to a school called the Del Arte School, of Physical Theater. So we'd take a physical approach to our theater work, and so we met there, started working Kalamazoo. We're in Milwaukee for a little bit, and then came to Detroit in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And what brought you to Detroit?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
But I'm from Michigan. I was born in Flint
Mm-hmm.
and grew up mostly in the UP
Mm-hmm.
in Marquette. And there's something about being in Michigan that's like familiar
Mm-hmm.
with the culture.
Yeah,
And
it's
it-
very diverse.
Yeah, and it was like weirdly being in Wisconsin, I was like, it's just like similar but a little different in this way that was really strange. But also, Richard grew up listening to techno, and like always loved the music and had
Yeah.
a soft spot for Detroit. And
And we actually just were visited here a few times, and we just met people, and we really liked the people we met. And we had a project, we had a performance we were making that we had a commission to make for a theater that was producing it in Milwaukee actually, but we didn't want to stay there, and we needed somewhere to make the work, so we just we decided to give it a go.
And what year was that, actually?
2010.
2010.
That
Oh
wasn't
my
too long
God.
ago.
no, not really. I mean,
12 years.
Depends on-
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, not too long. 12 years is, it's a little bit.
For a theater company, it's a while.
Yeah. Yeah, most theater companies
Yeah.
close by the 10-year mark. So,
By the time?
yeah. Yeah.
So good.
Well,
Most-
congratulations.
We gotta knock on wood. Someone better find some wood today.
Yeah. So,
And, yes, go on.
no, I don't know. So we started working. We moved. The neighborhood we're in is just north of Hamtramck, so it's right on the Hamtramck-Detroit border,
Mm-hmm.
but on the Detroit side.
Mhm.
And
We loved it.
yeah,
We just
Mhm.
love the neighborhood. We love the people in the neighborhood. There's a lot of permission to be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome.
Did you guys search that particular spot before you went there?
It was like an
it was like my ex-girlfriend's childhood
best friend's ex-boyfriend.
high school boyfriend knew somebody
So
with
Nicholas.
knew somebody with a place for rent,
Uh-huh.
and we were like, okay. And then it ended up being on the same block as these artists that we had really admired and had tried to get in touch with, and they didn't return our emails.
Because they
So-
had a lot of press, and so they were.
So is this project called Powerhouse Productions, which they were working in different houses during the foreclosure crisis to try to keep these houses from getting scrapped, and also trying to work with artists and community members to activate these houses in different ways. So we were like really excited about what they were doing. It turned out to be the house was right across from the Powerhouse, which was their like first project. So we're like, this is great, and we started working with them, and that was 2011 when we started working with them, and then slowly we started working on a space with them in our neighborhood, which was like right. Just like right next door to where we were living, actually. So, and that space is called Playhouse.
Playhouse?
Playhouse,
And what's
yeah.
the address of it?
It is 12657 Moran Street. And it is a house that has been converted into a performance space. So it looks like a normal house on the outside, and then you walk in and it's completely open on the inside, up to the seal, the roof basically. So it's like 24 feet, just open, sort of cathedral-like. So it's really beautiful.
Yes,
Must have
when I
nice
Googled
acoustic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was completely shocked when I Googled it. I'm like, a studio in Detroit where artists can come and, create, and, it's just, it's something unheard of. Especially like something new in Detroit, you know what I mean? And to come in and to bring this type of talent and to encourage the community to do this.
Yeah.
That's a big step.
Yeah, I mean, so we have, there's a Bengali music, because the neighborhood has a large Bengali population.
Oh, okay.
So there's Bongo School of Music.
Wow.
That's cool.
Liza started working with,
In 2011.
2011.
To learn,
Yeah.
they work on language and classical Bengali and more modern Bengali songs, but like a lot of the songs of Tagore and Nasrul Islam, some of these like older songs. Anyways, so they're in residence in the space, we're in residence in the space, and it's things have just kind of unfolded from
Wonderful.
there.
So I'd like to know what happens like when you're meeting with these musicians, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to know how you would describe your work. Like I feel like from what you're saying, it's like it's almost could be like very like not ceremonial, but like it has a different feel to it than what you would normally.
I would talk about it as like holistic, and our work in Detroit has been very holistic. So we move into this neighborhood, we're by an architect, like an incredible architect and designer. And in this encounter with them and the people they know and the people they've brought into the neighborhood, things start to change for us. So like we start working on this space, and then we're thinking about design in a different way, and that's impacting our work. We're involved with Bongo School of Music, and there's, like, we're very different, but the kinds of events that we start to build together are, like, we're doing events that are different than the kind of events we would hold. They're doing events slightly different than they would, because they have a space to spread out. We trust each other. There's like melding of different communities. So a lot of people who come to see our work have gone to see like a Bangla School of Music concert, which sometimes it's all in Bangla, like the whole event, and for me, that's really important to have people be in events in languages that they don't speak. I think that's like an amazing thing for.
But how did you get the Bengali community to do this? Like, how did you get them to come out of their comfort zone?
Well, they were at the school that was already functioning, like was already happening. So we just invited them to have a class there in our space.
I think people are really open. I mean,
Really?
honestly, like I think if you meet people and are like, you can just be yourself
Yes.
and you can do things your way, then you end up in this like really beautiful space.
And
Also,
food helps.
food helps, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Free food. And
yeah,
then-
Bengali food.
I mean, like all the aunties, like who
Yeah, make all the
make
food.
the food and it's delicious, and then like what are you gonna do?
And then
Yeah.
everyone shows up, and like
Right.
people, like the kid across the street, who is like a little, his family is pretty conservative. he would still come, take the food,
Oh.
and then leave. Which is fine, like
Yeah,
that's
it's
all
totally
fine.
fine, yeah.
For me, it's like these little encounters start to change your life, and
But it is true, like our work, because like we don't make our approach to theater is like pretty unconventional.
Yeah, could you talk to us about that? Yes.
Yeah. That because we worked for several years developing a performance. So like a normal theater would like takes a play and they rehearse it for like 3 to 5 weeks and then they put it on its feet. And we worked for 2 years. Working from the ground up, from the very seed of the idea to the creation of the characters, to the development of the text, to the design, and to a first draft, and then it continues
and
in
we
this.
keep working on it even as we're performing it. We'll change it. And
As you performing, you'll change it?
not like
Not the
the
day-
night of a performance, but like
Right.
in between this show in this town and this show in this.
Because we also tour the work, so we make it in our space, and then we'll tour it nationally or sometimes internationally. And so it gives us to work over time like this allows one to be responsive to say if things in the world, you're talking about whether something's relevant now or in what way. That wasn't the original word, but it was not relevant, but valid. Yeah. So it allows it over time to see these things are happening in the world. Like maybe this is something we need to address in the work, and the work can change in some way.
Like I can give an example for this. So we started work on this piece that Richard had an idea for a long time, about looking at myths of the West, like the American West, the Wild West, right? Because Richard's family's from Texas, and that's like a big part of his background. And so we started working on this. We were working on it in Milwaukee. It's related to some literature. We were using The Place of Dead Roads by William S. Burroughs and Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy as source material. But then we ended up in Detroit, and the language around Detroit at that time was all about pioneering and blank slate.
Which is super problematic, right? And super incorrect somehow.
So we were trying to grapple with that language while we were here, and while already working in the source material, and so that started to come into the work.
So we saw these like destructive myths, American myths, which were super destructive.
Like what?
Yes.
For example.
Like myths of American exceptionalism, of manifest destiny, which became the name of the piece. So that somehow that
This land
belonged to these Europeans who came here, believed they had some right to this place, right? And we were seeing in like media, and at the time, like 2010, 2011, the same kind of language being used around Detroit and its resurgence, and which we were finding like disturbing, somehow, and also having just moved here, feeling like, oh, we're like sort of complicit in this somehow, and so it needs to be grappled with. Like we need to own up to the reality of this language, the reality of our own history, as like white people in the U.S., and the like destructiveness of the culture that we're part of. So like it
was actually a very funny piece.
Yeah. So all that, but funny. So that, I think that's one example. I mean, like we also worked on this piece, the Radicalization Process, where we're looking at like 60s and 70s radical movements and how they reverberated today. And as we were working on it, like of course more and more things are always happening, so there's like ways for us to reflect in the material we're working on some of these current events, not in a way of like, okay, we're going to talk about directly, like in a topical way, like we're going to talk about the news of today or something, but to understand that that's people's context for the work. And so to be able to shape it based on what's happening.
Did you guys notice that your work made a difference, like in the way people perceive and think?
We have really interesting conversations after our pieces with people. I don't know if it makes a difference long term. I mean, like, art is one piece of the puzzle.
Yes.
But I do think it changed me. This stuff always changes me in how I'm working and what I'm thinking.
I mean, there have been a few instances where, like, there was one project we were doing that was a public project that we were doing actually with the Museum of Contemporary Art, Detroit. That was in the Mike Kelly Mobile Homestead, which is like this mobile home that's in the back of the museum, but that can travel. And we had this, we were doing this project called The Enemy of My Enemy, which were a series of collaborations with, what's that? Oh, no. Oh, we have to do the thing?
No, no, go ahead.
Oh, no, okay. Anyway,
Just-
we were working with artists in China and Russia and in Iran to do collaborations and to look at, like, nationalism. And someone came to the event and ended up opening up afterwards about his work in the military and in paramilitary organizations, and, like, in this really powerful way. And did he change? Like, I don't know.
But he had permission to talk.
To share
in
something.
some way.
Yeah.
You are watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Like, share, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching WJZZ Cool TV. We have with us today the Hinterlands Theater Company. Liza and Richard are explaining to us a little bit about how they got situated in Detroit, and we're starting to learn about a little bit about their work, and we will continue. So, how do you think your work is valid under today's circumstances, and why would you, or do you, I think you do, why do you disagree with consumer art?
I mean, like
The radicalization process, I felt that it was a very deep research about what would be valid in today's world, and that's why I'm asking.
yeah. I mean, there's we do take an anti-capitalist approach to our work, in the sense that we do try to prioritize people over product.
And don't you is your work, then would you consider your work, especially since you work a lot with energy, much more than a lot of other theater groups, and with kind of healing arts in a way, you prioritize people, but I think, don't you also kind of, isn't it sort of a research about people, about the identity structure of the I, or something like that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is all research, and there's so much waste in research. And we are a laboratory theater, and what that means is we have experiments, we have questions, and we try things to answer these questions, or we engage with these questions. Sometimes things don't work. Sometimes, and that's okay, because that's what happens in a laboratory. And it is, like, how we spend our day is probably really different than how a lot of people spend our day.
How do you spend your day?
Well, like today, do you want to talk about
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so today we got up, we did we met, the four of us who are rehearsing, we met at 9:30 in the morning, we did a half hour of physical conditioning together, and then went into physical work and singing, where we were working with an ancient folk dance from the British Isles, and with this maypole song, essentially. Singing it constantly for an hour and a half.
With
and
this dance?
With this specific dance. and then eventually improvising in some ways based on this dance. And
This is part of the research of one of the team members on this project, who's particularly interested in these like ancient animals that are still used in the UK and other places too, but that are like visiting festivals. You know, where you have a stick horse, a hobby horse, or these sort of different animal creatures, and you go to someone's house, and the animal, it's an excuse to like wreck the house and to be like to be naughty, and then they give you money and drinks, and then you move on to the next house, and everyone sings. So it's like from this tradition that still exists, and one of our team members is doing this research. So we're experimenting with this research. Then we had lunch, and then we had rehearsal where we're like working with a physical metaphor that relates to whiteness, because this relates to the project we're working on now. And it was this physical metaphor that I had developed, and so we're like working in this physical vocabulary for a while. And then we did some character-driven work, looking at something else someone had proposed the previous day.
Yeah, so we did a little bit of admin at like 5 p.m. So so it's like that we do I mean, it's like a Monday morning, and we're it's strange.
Trance dance time.
Basically, yeah. So there is an element of like, okay, we're working on ourselves through this, and that we have before COVID, we had regular open sessions where anyone could come and do our practice with us. Like every month we would do these, and we had almost weekly singing sessions for several years too, where people came and sang in the space.
The community?
Yeah, anyone could come.
Any age.
Wow.
Yeah. And these workshops and trainings we also did in lots of other places. So it's a way for people to engage with this part of the process. But you don't have to be a theater maker. You don't have to have any experience.
It's kind of better if you're not, because then you don't have ideas about what theaters should be.
Yeah. So of course, like the last 2 years, like a lot of people, it's been, things have closed in a lot for us, of course. But we're starting to open back up again, because that was a really important part of the process for us, actually. And we're realizing like that part of people coming in and participating was really important. And I think there is, like, I wouldn't go so far as to talk about myself as in a healing capacity, I don't know if that's really my training, but what is healing, I think, is to work on oneself over time, and we can provide opportunities for people to do that in different ways through these ways of working.
And to externalize things that we hold inside, I think is actually really huge. To be able, if you're like, I am a twisted person, or if you say this about yourself, I'm not don't say this about myself, I'm just thinking of something easy. I have my own baggage. Or like, I have baggage. Okay, what does that mean? If you externalize it and you're carrying all these bags, and you work with bags and a ton of bags, and you have all these suitcases, there's something that's freeing about that, of like, oh, this is what it really feels like to have baggage. Do I have baggage? Can I put the bags down? What can I do with this baggage that I have?
And then this process of like, okay, identifying a metaphor about myself, whether, okay, I have baggage, or maybe I'm off balance. I feel like I'm really off balance right now. Well, why don't I really put myself off balance? See what it is to really work with my balance in this way. And that can be the starting point for a character or for a scene that is rooted in something true about the self. And then that can be contextualized in terms of a performance and everything else. But first starting with something that comes from a personal question.
Well, that comes to the next question, since we're
Oh.
on the topic. How would you describe yourselves as artists?
Yeah.
How would you describe yourself?
I mean, I am a trained actor, and I trained a long time as an actor. I'm also a director. and I'm a musician. Yeah, as my, which started smaller and has grown. So I think those are the ways that I would describe myself primarily.
I'm an actor creator, and other things too. I mean, we've gotten engaged in what's called public practice or social practice, but it's kind of uncomfortable words for me to use because I don't totally own it.
But we do a lot of
Public work that is in the visual art world that isn't visual art. I would never call myself a visual artist, but there is something like...
But we find ourselves working a lot with museums and galleries.
And I like doing it, and I do a lot of... I really enjoy work in community that is surprising and not what you'd expect, but also takes things that are happening in the community and elevates it, or like gives it attention and love. So that's something.
So there's like a curatorial process too, like because we work a lot with other artists, and we also commission works by artists that we admire, or
sometimes they're works we wish we would make ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. But there's people that so I think we are, because of our space, we have something to offer artists, and so we can also say like, oh, okay, there's this artist I really would like to work with, like let's invite them to work in the space, or oh, there's this Detroit artist that we feel like should get more support, like let's give them a residency and maybe we can find them some money. So we also do this kind of producing work and curatorial work that's important somehow.
And I like training people. I teach also, and I actually really enjoy helping people feel better about these attitudes they have about... There's a lot of misconceptions people have about the body, their body, and about their voice. And I have misconceptions about my voice in particular, less now about my body, but it is always changing, and I'm like 41 right now, so... So it's
you're like growing as you're doing this.
Yeah, totally. And I want other people to feel like they can change. That we can all, that we all have the ability to change. Yeah, and that we're all changing whether we like it or not. And so there's some liberation in that. So to me there is this important part of the training people.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is artistically. And I translate, and I like that.
And when you train people, do you go through like a physical training and a vocal training and a theater training? Are they all connected together somehow? And if they are, could you explain how they are?
Yeah, I think sometimes we end up we'll often start from a physical place, or it depends on who the person is who comes to us. Sometimes we've worked with people with dance backgrounds, we've worked with people with theater backgrounds. We do work all together with these things because we're looking for images. You are working physically, but it's not movement for movement's sake. You're looking for images or memories or characters or something. And then working with the voice. Right now we're doing a lot of work with song, but we have also done a lot of work with text and how people use text and how you speak text.
Yeah, I mean, right now, because the current project we're working on is working with traditional Appalachian songs. There's a bunch of layers to the piece, but one of them is looking at Appalachian migration to Detroit, which there was a big migration here, which isn't talked about that much.
And when was that?
Between the 1930s and even up until 70s, yeah.
Yeah, 70s. It was for the auto industry. It came and went.
Yeah, but like some neighborhoods, like so Corktown, but like north of 75 there, was called the Briggs neighborhood. Now they call it like North Corktown. So that was like a big Appalachian population there. There was a big population in like Brightmoor, Redford area, and then like Taylor, some of these like suburbs, like which people call like Taylor-tucky, and Warren, Hazel Park. There's like a lot of these like first rung suburbs had these like populations. So so there's like a historical component to the piece, but then we're also working with these songs, and so yeah, we've been singing a lot. We sing every day, usually, sometimes for quite a while.
And your background in theater, you said, comes from the Del Arte School in California, which is what kind of in case there are any actors out there
Yeah,
are
yeah.
listening and watching, what kind of techniques are they? Because they're pretty different than the usual American theater.
Yeah, it's true. And that's only like one part of two of our training. But
Oh, yes.
an important part, yeah.
Yes.
They come out of a European like tradition of working with mask and clown and commedia dell'arte. So these traditional forms that's out of the Lecoq School, which is in France, and then some other bunch of other teachers too. So they're working with these kind of larger forms. So as a way of understanding things about theater and the actor.
How theater's made, and
Yeah.
everything you do there is stuff you make yourself, which
So you
is
make
great.
you make a piece every week.
Yeah, every
Wow.
week you're
Um,
making something. Which, so if you want to learn how to make something, it's a great way to do it because they just throw you in.
And some of it's gonna be bad. Like if you make something every week, like it's not all gonna be good, right? So
And it's just like random.
No, you have an assignment.
very specific
Okay.
assignments. It's kind of like I was hearing recently about there's I forget the name of the ceramicist, but there was a famous ceramics teacher who had all of his students, his first year students. He had half of the students. He said he was going to grade them on the quality of one pot, of their best pot. And then the other half the class, he was going to just judge on the number of pieces they produced. So sheer quantity. And the ones that he asked he judged on quantity actually ended up making better pots
Oh my
than the
goodness.
ones he had judged on quality. Because the ones on quality were obsessing about how to get this thing right, and the ones who were doing quantity just made a bunch of pots and learned how by doing it and just repeating it. So I think there's something really valuable about that. I think for beginning students of anything, but for actors, for creators, to just make a bunch of stuff and just accept like it's gonna be bad, you know, like like at least as bad and much bad stuff as good stuff.
Yes.
Um,
We're going to take a commercial
okay.
break and then we will continue. You are watching Creative Chronicles live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and all top social media platforms. Make sure you like and follow, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching WJZZ, the coolest TV in the nation. And we will continue with the conversation. I wanted to ask you about the techniques that you use, and I've noticed that they're extremely different. And when I was talking to people, you were telling me like, you guys use energy work to do the. I noticed like the expression is different, the emotions are different, and like, can you talk about that?
Yeah. Yes. So we do. You know, I don't say energy work personally, but I don't think it's wrong either. The description. But it does, like, there are people who use energy work in like a healing way or like as practitioners, like Reiki, et cetera, and I just don't want to like confuse what we do with that kind of work. But we do physical training that is meant to expand the presence of the actor, performer. That is sometimes this. So I'm trying to like how to even to describe. So sometimes like for one training we start with stretching and then we start to expand that stretching until it starts to take up more and more space in the space, and then we build the tempo of that until the movement is incredibly fast and full, taking up huge amounts of space, explosive movement that fills the whole space, and then and then we stop and silence the breath and move ourselves slightly off balance, and then repeat this process, and it builds an energy in the body which then can be used as a performer to guide the attention of the audience. It can also be used creatively to create characters, to fill an image on stage. But we do.
But that training, I'll just say,
Yeah.
is like comes from an artist named Carlos Simeone, who's a Brazilian artist and has a company called Lume Teatro, and it's research that he was a part of into these like different energetic bodies, and that body that was described is the energetic body. There's a vibration body and a ghost body and all these different bodies, and so that came to me. I brought it to the company, and Richard, having not experienced seeing me, was found a way to develop it, to make it ours, and like a way that we want to use it, and so it shifts.
We also, I spent 5 years at Double Edge Theater, which is there in Western Massachusetts. Stacy Klein is the director there, and she was a student of, she was Rena Moretska's assistant, who was from the Grotowski lineage, Jerzy Grotowski. So a lot of the training we do is in a lineage, not all of it.
No, but
some,
Simi is also in this lineage via other people.
Yeah. So there's a lineage of, and it's not like a straight line. It's like a big weird web, of people who are doing this kind of physical and vocal work that is. It is for theater, and also it is getting at something else too. And
I mean, it's energy work, but it's always done in the context of theater and performance. It's never inseparable from the methods of other theater masters who have given the techniques to actors. So I think we've come to a time in life where it's possible to acknowledge these healing abilities, and we need them now because we're passing on a world to the next generation that's extremely imbalanced, and they have to find a way to not let it die. And I think even I've seen gurus like 15 years ago be very, very finding it gut-wrenching when other people are teaching yoga who have not been enlightened through the process of yoga, for example, etc. But now that time has passed, I think even I see them they think it's better that it's being, spread, even if it's not in its most, balanced, good form. It's still, it's still giving something that's necessary.
Yeah.
And
I mean, think about singing, right? Singing was also the idea that somehow you have to be a great singer to get something out of singing is just not true, right? Singing as a practice can open up so much for a person, and energetically, yes, but the vibrations of the voice, they just feels good to sing. You sing and you like feel it in your body, and it's like, oh, this feels good, and I feel better if I sing than if I don't sing, and I think that can be done on any level.
And I just flashed on something, but it does have to do with healing, but maybe it's a way of giving an example to certain people that by opening the breath, and with what happens when you sing and you open the breathing channels in your body, is what even doctors say is a way of preventing cancer. That cancer arises because also these breathing channels are shut, and then there are some kind of chemical transformations. So, I mean, it is very healing also because frequencies and sounds affect us in many different ways, and generating energy is, it's when the voice comes out, it is this energy that's coming upward. It's not just a mechanical thing that's happening with the diaphragm, and the impulse to action is the same impulse to singing as well. So I think there was a time when these were united, and then they became separated, like a lot of things.
Yeah, and this is a bit of why we take what Liza mentioned, this holistic approach, and with the idea of something that's a whole, and that we are somehow whole human beings.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so that that we don't have to break ourselves into parts. And there's something about being, I think there's still room for like people to be great singers, you know, or
Definitely.
like masterful dancers, or all of these things. Like it's totally, that's fantastic. People should do that. But there is something too about just doing it that is that's important for people.
I wanted to ask you, how do you bring the characters to life?
Liza is the master of character work.
Yes?
I don't know if that's true, but I like it. I feel like if I don't have a zany character, after a couple of years, I'll like find a way to put one in. I think this comes from this Lecoq-based training, and also I trained in traditional Chinese performance for 3 years.
Didn't you go to China and train there?
I did. I enrolled in a middle school when I was 22.
Oh
And
my
I was
God.
like,
Well, because that's when you start studying the traditional opera form.
Wait,
yes,
you were 22 and was middle school there?
well, my classmates were like aged 8 to, the second class was 8 to 18, that, which 18 was like very old for the starting off, and I was 22. Yeah, so, but there's a lot of work with,
Liza's committed. Yeah.
I didn't know what to do after undergrad. So that's what I did. But
You went back in time.
I went back in time. It was such a, yeah, that's like, if I ever read a book, I would write about that. And I'd have my classmates write with me, and write what they thought about me, which I think was like, that was really strange.
And how did you feel when you were there? I think you felt
I felt
great
out of
somehow.
place, but I felt good about what I was very curious, and everyone was so generous with me because I arrived at this point in time where it's a very traditional form, and this is the early 2000s, and it was really in trouble. Like, I was at the Sichuan Provincial Chuanju School. Chuanju is the name of the form, Sichuan opera. We call it opera, but the actual term is Chuanju. And there were no students. There were no students in the form. After the first year I got there, they graduated, and then they didn't get another class, and I was the only one, and people were like, who is that girl from the U.S. who is the only Chuanju student? It was useful for people to get more students in, and there was also like a lot of change of policy and increase in funding, but there was this period where people are like, oh, if we don't pass this is it. This is the moment that we were always afraid of, that this was going to end.
Because it's an oral tradition.
Yeah, it is oral tradition, and so I think that has been a very strong impact on me of like understanding how these different things that I've received from teachers are a part of an oral tradition. It's not about me. It can be about me. It's about me in this moment trying to do my best to develop the thing that I was given and take responsibility for it and then pass it on. And that it doesn't stop with me. It keeps going. So, I mean, in terms of character, the work in that form is, it's very strongly divided into these different kinds of archetypes. And you are that archetype or you're not. Like, this action fits in that archetype or it doesn't. And so that kind of rigidity or codification, or I guess that framework, was really powerful for me to tap into. And then the Lecoq training at Del Arte is also in this paradigm of it is or it isn't. And especially our teacher, Ronlyn Foreman, who is a mixed bag, but all right, Rodman, I love you. He would accept that. He's a hard man, but an
He's
incredible,
a brilliant teacher.
He is
Yeah.
just astonishing as a teacher. And Joan Shirley, who was another one of my teachers there, and Richards, and who recently passed away, were just like amazing at mask work and explaining how that a mask is a thing that you take on, and a character is also a mask. And so, which is kind of the opposite of the approach of Grotowski, but I think I think people working in the Grotowski lineage, but I think you can exist in that paradox of both things, that all these characters I create are myself, and I can accept that part of myself by externalizing it in this way that I'm externalizing these metaphors, these things that I'm struggling with. And in that way, I can meet it and fill it and deal with it on some level. But that's not for the audience. That's just me personally, and maybe Richard.
but at the same time, like when Liza works on the character, like she really does disappear somehow. Or when you're doing your best work, like that Liza is gone somehow, and this other person is there, and
So the character takes over.
but in a way that, at least for the audience, the character takes over. I think for Liza, that maybe that's not true, but
It's a part of you.
And how do you feel about what do you think has happened to theater in the past decade or 2 decades? Do you think it's, I hate to say these words, but I've never asked anyone this, but do you think it's in danger of extinction?
I don't really pay attention to theater, which is probably bad to work in theater and not really pay that attention. I do pay attention to contemporary performance, and I think some of our fixation on genre is part of if we can let go of the fixation on genre, I think it'll solve some problems we have around inequity in performing arts. That like a lot of times people get really stuck on text-driven theater, and then have this inability to see anything that's coming from like African tradition or Middle Eastern tradition, because it's not recognized as theater, or of other kinds of traditions. And I think we will be much happier as a society and as a world if we're able to like talk about performance or story-based performance, or I guess like find some other way to talk about it, about what it is.
that isn't that the word theater has an association for people about like, oh, I'm gonna go sit in this place, and I don't know, that we often don't use the word, and we actually don't have theater in our name. We're just the hinterlands. I accept that we make theater, but we don't tell anybody.
Right.
And so
Except for when we're applying for a grant.
yeah, and then we have to say we're doing theater, National Theater Project. We do make theater, we promise.
Okay.
Do you guys
You are watching Creative Chronicles on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Like, subscribe, share, and thank you for watching WJZZ, the coolest station in the world.
Make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you leave a comment.
So I do think that forms change, and that I think that's okay. And I do think traditional forms are really important also, but